Welcome back, everyone. A huge thanks to Twanning from VP Bank for sharing his recorded session. Our next session dives into the hidden risk in cloud-native environments and why traditional security tools often miss them. Please join me in welcoming Tim Chase from Orca Security. Tim, take it away.
All right, thank you. Thanks everyone for joining. I look forward to talking with you for the next few minutes. A lot of times when we are thinking about our risk inside of our cloud native stack, we really focus kind of on those easy buttons that we've always thought of, right? Maybe it's the posture issues that we find, maybe it's the vulnerabilities. But a lot of times from what I found over the years is that it's the hidden risks that are there that are maybe a little bit harder to track that will really kind of bite you if you're not paying attention. So I just wanted to walk through some of the ones that I have found over the years and just kind of impart some advice. And so I divided them really into three different types. And the first one is hidden supply chain risks. And when you really think about security these days, the supply chain is really where we see a lot of 0 days or a lot of vulnerabilities and breaches. Just because I think a lot of times it's easy to forget about and it's hard to track. And the supply chain definition can be a little bit difficult to come up with, right? We used to think of supply chain as maybe that AC vendor that had access into your network that you figured about over time. But these days, it's really kind of broadened even into the open source that you use, right, inside of your code. And just for a couple of statistics, when I was looking around to just see, how broadly we're impacted by supply chain issues, the number itself was a little bit hard to find because supply chain can be defined in different ways. But a lot of what I was seeing was anywhere up to 96, 97% of organizations can be affected by a supply chain issue of some sort. And 96% of code bases include free and open source software, which is another statistic that is really crazy to think about. It's a great use of code to save time and to save money and resources, but at the same time, it's introducing risk into your platform, into your cloud native environment. So when you start to think about where these risks might be, one place is with vulnerable base images. This is where we can partner with folks to have these clean images, so that you always know that your base images are up to date. But when you manage these yourselves, a lot of times you forget about them over time, right? And so that's where you can get your vulnerable base images. And by vulnerable base images, I typically mean things along the lines of maybe your libraries are outdated or your operating systems are outdated. And so we really need a way to keep those up to date so that your supply chain isn't affected. And that can even lead to hidden dependencies, right? I've been doing application security testing for about as long as I've been in the workforce now. I'd say for over 20 years in some way or another. And using SCA tools can be challenging at times. And one of the challenges is that a lot of times we focus mainly on those first line dependencies, but we forget about those the dependencies of the dependencies, if that makes sense, right? You may use open source inside of your platform, which is typically normal, but what sort of dependencies do those open source pieces need themselves? And so you need a way to be able to track all of that together to understand your true risks, because maybe you don't use Log4j, and maybe your open source that you look at doesn't use Log4j. But what about if one of the components that you were using uses it, right? So in order to truly have an understanding of your supply chain risk, you need to understand all of your dependencies. And then finally, minimal images. Now, this kind of goes along with the base images, but I put it up here because it's a little bit different. When I do security testing, or I've talked with organizations that are looking at their container security or their cloud security, I hear a lot, well, these are just ephemeral images. They're not going to last a long time, or they don't really have anything installed on them. It's just the absolute base of what we need. Well, even then, you can still have vulnerabilities, right? Even ephemeral things are up there for a certain amount of time. Even small base OSs still can become outdated, right? they may still use that log4j even on that base image. So don't just assume that because you're using something for a short amount of time, or because you're using a very small image inside of your cluster, that it's not vulnerable or still kind of subject to the dependency or the vulnerability detection. Like, always check those as well. Never assume just because they're small that they don't have vulnerabilities. And another kind of the way that I block it into the second part here is around the infrastructure and the visibility of it. And according to the Orca's 2025 State of Cloud Security report, 32% of cloud assets are in a neglected state. And there are many reasons that this could be, right? When I think about why this is, there's probably no one answer that's going to tell you why our assets get neglected. But I think when you think about it and you just understand how the cloud works, you could think of things like we don't understand our cloud sprawl. Maybe we're really good in one cloud, but not multi-cloud. Or the cloud team moves so fast that the security team can't keep up to get an accurate inventory, right? And so whatever the reason might be, like, we as a security team and industry have to do better at understanding our cloud assets to keep them out of the state. So just a few things to look for from the infrastructure and the cloud perspective. The first one is misconfigurations. A lot of times these can go, we can think of kind of this in the CSPM realm of things, right? And they can create backdoors into our environment. So you could think of maybe a Kubernetes cluster that's accidentally completely exposed to the internet, or maybe it's a process related to your Kubernetes that shouldn't be exposed, like an admin console or something like that should never be exposed to the outside, that we do because of a misconfiguration. And misconfigurations can be easy to do, right? It's not like somebody went in and purposely did it, probably for ease of use. But when you're building code from scratch, or maybe there's an error in your infrastructure as code, those can lead to these misconfigurations. So you need to make sure that you're monitoring all of this to be able to flag for those. And then the network segmentation kind of goes along with that. One of the things that historically we've been bad at in the security industry is network segmentation. When we were in data centers, it was very hard to do. But one of the advantages of being in the cloud is the fact that we can do this a little bit easier, right? With security groups and various tools, we can limit which servers can talk to other ones, right? And it can all be code. So we need to do a good job of that network segmentation. If you have clusters that don't need to talk to each other, or servers that don't need to talk to each other, let's lock that down. Because this is one of those things that can make a small breach go to a large breach, right? So if were to get in with a misconfiguration and they're able to get into your network, we need something that's going to stop them from being able to kind of expand their reach and really see what they can get to. Because a lot of times we know that once an attacker gets into your environment, they're going to see what they can get to and what data they have access to. And so network segmentation is one of those things that can really stop an attacker. And then compliance gaps. Once again, kind of going back into my history, like, this is one of those things that has been difficult to solve for a long time. Like, when I was doing manual testing, I would test something in a test environment, okay it to go to production, and then inside of production, they find a vulnerability that didn't exist in tests. And I was like, well, what the heck? That was not there. Oh, well, our environments are completely different. We're on a different version of Tomcat, or we're not using the updated libraries quite yet. We haven't deployed those to production because it's going to break some stuff. Well, we need to understand those compliance gaps, because those can lead to infrastructure invisibility, and those can lead to breaches, right? And so infrastructure has code, and being able to monitor that are one of those things that you can use to make sure that doesn't happen, where you can go from from dev to test to production, all using infrastructure as code to make sure that your deployments are repeatable. And then use something like Orca, or a tool that can help you understand that drift detection, right? Where once you get this container that's approved for prime time, then you can make sure that nobody changes it in production. And if somebody does change it and changes the configuration, you can be notified around that. And then finally, the last thing I'll call out is the runtime blind spots. So, we talked a lot about kind of the misconfigurations and the build time. But the runtime is one of those things that we need to be paying attention to. Sometimes we're so focused on the posture, we forget about looking at the runtime. And so the statistic that I'll throw out here is also from our cloud security state of cloud security report. And 38% of organizations with sensitive data in their databases also have those databases exposed to the public. And I don't think that they do that intentionally. I don't think that organizations tend to go out there and just just put their databases out there for everyone to see, right? I think that it kind of comes back to the misconfigurations again in your runtime, right? Where when we deploy sensitive data like databases with PII or PHI or company information, do we have a good understanding of the network policies and the RBAC controls associated with this? Because when I think about runtime security, whether it's in the cloud or not in the cloud, I kind of I describe it as like two different parts that we need to have right. One is we need to make sure that our identity is tight and that we know who has access to what and what they can do. We also need to understand the data classification. What data do we have? What type of data and where is it stored? And all the other stuff in between is extremely important, but having the identity and the data understanding are just two of the most important things here. And so you can see as we kind of walk through this, right, a misconfiguration of the network policy or the RBAC controls could potentially lead to a privilege escalation, right? If somebody is able to gain access into your environment because it's something that's misconfigured, well, then they can escalate their privileges once they get in, because we all know that once somebody is in, we don't always know what access they have. One of the hardest things to track over time is who has access to what, because we do a lot of copy pasting or people move. And so that's why you need kind of these things, these product, we call them CIEM, Cloud Infrastructure Entitlement Management, that can help you understand maybe where you're overprivileged, right? So understanding that is extremely important to your to understanding your cloud native security stack. And then finally, understanding the data that you have, right? So that you can put special protections around your most sensitive data, whether that's your PII or PHI in your databases, whether it's some data in a bucket that maybe customers have uploaded that you want to make sure you've got the right permissions on. All of these three things really kind of go hand in hand, because it ties your identity and your RBAC controls to making sure that if your privileges are not correct, they can't escalate, and then ultimately understanding what data they have access to. And kind of the last thing that I'll call out here as it relates to data exposure is don't just think of data exposure in terms of PII and PHI. We focus on that a lot, and that's super important. But you also need the ability to understand secrets, right? There's a lot of secrets today, whether that's secrets to your GitHub repo, secrets to authenticate into your cloud, whatever it may be. You need to make sure you have a good handle on those secrets, and they're not just pasted in logs or they're pasted in code, because ultimately if any of these, if you have a misconfiguration or a privilege escalation that leads to the data exposure, you don't want them to be able to have access to those secrets. And if they do, you need to have a quick way to be able to rotate those. So I would just say, when you're thinking about the data exposure and protecting your data in your cloud native environment, look at your key management processes so that you can understand your secrets that are all around. And so that's really what I had from a presentation perspective. So I'll turn it over right now to see if there happen to be any questions in the chat.
Hey, thanks so much, Tim. Goldcast is really strict on time, and it will kick us off. So we don't have time for questions, unfortunately. We have one session left today. We're joined by Dr. Nola Rona, who's going to walk us through how to automate container image promotion from source code all the way through production using secure, repeatable pipelines. So click the link in the agenda tab to join us for that session. And thank you so much again, Tim, for joining us today. Really enjoyed your talk, and we appreciate you giving us your time.